Okay, guys, so it's funny because when I say, all right, I'm going to record more episodes, then I can't find the time to do it. And then when I say, okay, I'm just going to stick with one, episode a week because I can do that. All of a sudden, I've got time. Shit's weird, man. This world's weird. Okay. First and foremost, I'm going to make it a habit of starting each podcast by telling you guys, new listeners, welcome, increase the speed so that you can get through the information. Okay. When a person speaks, they tend to speak in a very slow cadence because they're trying to find the words, right? You're creating, thoughts, you're creating ideas, you're structuring things together, like I'm doing quite right now, right? I'm not reading off a sheet of paper. So there's going to be a lot of space. There's going to be a lot of, and fillers, and there's going to be a lot of dragging words. That's just normal for speaking. You don't have to listen to that because when your brain takes in information, it doesn't really need the fillers, right? It's just absorbing, it's consuming. So it doesn't need the space, right? It's consuming. You don't need the same time to consume as I do to create. So take advantage. This is why a lot of these platforms like YouTube and Overcast and Spotify, whatever it is you're listening to me on, give you the ability to increase the speed because they know that, they understand that you can take in the information faster than I can say it to you. So hit that 1.5x button, hit the 2x button, because if this is a 30-minute podcast, you can take in, I promise you, your brain can take in the information, the 30-minute information, in 15 minutes, double the speed. It's good to use also when you listen to podcasts as well, other podcasts, I should say, as well as audiobooks too. Get in the habit of doing that. It is how I go through books and how I'm able to read as much as I do because I find my mind to listen super fast and retain the information. It also turns it into a meditation. So I always start the podcast. This is I know you guys, the regular listeners, are like, okay, I get it, Joe. But you guys, it's, the podcast is growing. More and more people are listening. I'm seeing the numbers go up. I really appreciate you guys. People who left, there was like a questionnaire on the Spotify, and I asked a question, but then I can't figure out how to respond to the questions that were asked and answered. So I apologize if I couldn't go in and reply through Spotify. That's a technical error on my part, but I am seeing your responses on those episodes that have the Q&A on it, and I'm grateful for that. Until I can sort that out, I probably won't do that again until I can figure out a way to respond. Or maybe I will just post it just to read your response, that you guys know that I am reading your responses or reading your questions, and then maybe I'll just try to respond like on an episode. Maybe that's the whole way it goes. Anyway, that's just our intro. You guys are used to bullshit in the beginning of the podcast. So that's bullshit at the beginning of the podcast. So instead of me inundating you with a bunch of ads, I am inundating you with a bunch of information on how to effectively take in information so that you can go through the podcast more efficiently. Yeah, there you go. All right, so that's a starter. Now we're going to jump right in. The last 2 videos, I think, on my TikTok channel, they will be coming to the YouTube channel at some point, as soon as I get my life together, have been about dreams. And I wanted to do a deeper dive because a lot of people were asking, hey, can you do like a podcast on dreams? I can do more than one because, look, dreams are they're a wild space, yeah. But I can start with this for sure. I want to share something personal with you guys first and foremost. So for the last 10 years that I can remember, probably more than that, but for the last 10 years, I've been having the same it's not a recurring dream. It's in the sense of the plot's not the same. Okay. So, but it's been the same individual that I keep dreaming about. He is tall. It's about 6'4", and he is blonde with blue eyes, but I can't quite grasp his face. His energy just feels the same. And it's weird. I know it's weird. We're starting with, look, actually, I don't have to explain. I don't need the preamble, right? I don't need the disclaimer. It is, you guys are familiar with the podcast. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to jump in. So same entity visiting me in dreams, and not like it's not a sex dream. Don't make it weird. Let's not make it weird. It's not a sex dream. There's just this weird sort of sense of like a familial bond almost. Like he's like my best friend, and there's no negative vibes to him. His energy is always like positive. And then the interactions, I always wake up feeling like joyful and kind of elated, but then there's this like sadness that comes after, because it's like there's a separation. And I don't know if you guys, and I think I might do a Q&A on this one, because I want to know if anybody else has had a similar interaction or is having a similar interactions. I'm used to having dreams where like I'll like dream of like a family. Like I've had dreams where I've had like children. I can still remember. And then I wake up, and you just wake up with this like profound sense of sadness, because you know like you're not gonna see them again. It was just like you realize when you wake up, okay, it's a dream. And then you know that you're not, like, that's it. And then you just feel like, oh, fuck, like you're not going to see them again, So I've had those kind of dreams often. And I wasn't always myself. I was in a different avatar. I should say I wasn't always in this present avatar. I was in a different avatar or a different form. But I was living that life, and you do get that emotional connection. But this one with the recurring tall blonde, it's the same person, or the same entity, the same energy, the same consciousness, and we keep meeting and interacting. It's like once every 2-3 months. It's weird, guys. But I do think it's the more, I think we need to talk about it. Like, let's talk about it, right? By serendipity, I was listening to Lex Fridman podcast. I just started. A couple people kept mentioning him, so I decided to look him up, and I checked out an episode he did with Brian Murawski. I don't think that's how you Murawski, who wrote the Immortality Key. The Immortality Key is a great book. It talks about how essentially psychedelics were utilized by people in the past to as religion, to consult with the gods, and he breaks down even the fact that, whether or not Jesus was actually like a real person, or if he was just an extension of the cult of Dionysus. I would highly recommend the book, because it's very mind-opening. In fact, I'm going to go back and reread it. I think this week, right now, I'm presently reading, hold on, let me share, because I like sharing with you guys. I'm reading Until the End of Time by Brian Greene. But then for the rest of this week, I think I'm going to do a deep dive into like revisiting books on like psychedelics, like DMT, trips, things of that nature. So I listened to the podcast, that particular podcast with Fridman and Brian Murawski. And then on that episode, they mentioned Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. So I went back and re-listened to that. And towards like the middle to end, he talked about how when people take psychedelics, the place that they are visiting, that they recall, like they have these experiences, might actually be an actual place. Now, when you hear that, it seems weird, right? If you just take it at face value, our society, if you say that to a regular person, they would say, no, when you take a trip, you're not actually going to a real place, right? It's just a hallucination. Except that when people take certain drugs, they all report the same entities. So that's at what point, why are people who take DMT all hallucinating the same thing? Either way, it's a phenomenon that bears paying attention to, right? Why are we all I've never had DMT, but why are they all seeing the DMT elves? And so the conclusion, and I echo his conclusion, like I agree with him, but the conclusion he comes to is that this must be another dimension that people are actually visiting. Now you hear that and you go, well, how is that possible? Well, I want to break that down to you. Over and over and over again, I say on this podcast, you're not your body. You're not your body. You're not your body. Your body is just an avatar. If you want to, an example that I use to explain to my daughter is, we've been playing Don't Starve together, right? And so she always plays as the spider, and I play as like the guy that can grow a beard. Not crazy with the names right now, but it doesn't matter. Those are the avatars that allow me to experience the game, right? I myself, Joe, cannot enter into the world of Don't Starve with this body, right? So I need to manipulate the body that is already in that world. So my consciousness that is bound to Joe can interact with the world of Don't Starve, right? Using that avatar that's already in the game. Okay, but the avatars, things can happen to the avatar in the game, but it's not really happening to me. I mean, I'm personally affected while I'm playing the game, like if my character is dying or my sanity is going down or I'm hungry. As you play the game, you know, you'll catch your saying, you start identifying with the avatar in the game, right? Oh shit, I'm hungry. Oh shit, like my sanity is going down. Oh shit, I'm about to die, right? And then you react as though that is really you in the game, because that's how your mind melds, right? Your mind is programmed to attach itself to something that you can control, right? So the fact that that exists should tell you that the same thing, you reverse and engineer it, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? You reverse engineer it, and then that tells you that then your consciousness it's the same thing that's happening with the body right now. Your consciousness is controlling the avatar, the face that you see when you look in the mirror, but it's only a vehicle, like a VR game, right? It's only a machine that allows you to experience this holographic world that we're existing in. And the more and more physicists are saying that our universe is kind of a hologram. Like let's just accept that. And more reading on that, check out Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, if you want more information on that. So you are not your body. You are not your body. You are not your body. Your body is essentially just an avatar that allows you to experience this simulation right now. Okay? Same thing as I am not the character in Don't Starve. I wish I could think of his name. I could see him. Can't get the words right now, but it's okay. I am not the character in Don't Starve that I'm controlling. I'm just controlling the character. It's a representation of me that allows me to interact with that world. But if I put the controls down, I can no longer interact with that world. So what I explained to Dora as we were playing is when a person dies, we just moved into a new place and I think it's haunted. And the reason why I think it's haunted is because I was like in the pantry putting things away, and I was just by myself, and all of a sudden the pantry door just closed. There was all the windows are closed. There's no draft or anything like that. It just closed. Like I felt a presence, and then the door just like shut. Not aggressively, not violently. It just closed. And then I was like, hey, yo, who was down here, right? And my daughter was like, I'm upstairs. And I was like, oh, bet. Okay, cool. And then I just started talking to whatever was there. Because that's who the fuck I am. I'm like, I'm not afraid. It's okay. But don't do that. Right? Like, I understand that it took a lot of energy for you to sort of like affect change in this reality. Somehow, I don't know how you're doing that. But clearly there's a lot of energy that you're able to sort of do that to affect this world. And it's beyond my understanding. But stop fucking doing that. Like, don't do that. Let's not do that again. I see you, acknowledge you. I don't see you, but I caught that. I'm not going to dismiss it as, it must have been, because there's no other explanation. Like there was no wind. It just shut. I even opened the door. I kept messing with the door to see if it would do it again. No, I felt an energy, and then I felt it move. And then I was like, all right, well, it's probably just a time traveler from the future, I guess, who's traveling back, who's traveled back for some reason to observe me in non-corporeal form. That's cool and everything, but like, stop doing that. It freaks me out. I don't like it. It doesn't scare me. It's not something, I don't want to deal with that. So let's not do that again. And I kept it moving. But aside from those instances, which if it is a time traveler from a future, then they're using technology that might allow them to, on a small scale, affect change in our reality. But it's like, it's got to be some kind of a hack. And I guarantee you that if it's a future technology, it's a mod, and they're not supposed to be doing that. I guarantee you that in the future, people are like, how can you say shit like with such confidence about like the future? Because I can. Because I fucking can and I want to. Think about like all the shit that we've learned from scientists, like all their fucking theories about like gravity and evolution and string theory that they have no fucking evidence for. I mean, like, yes, evolution, you have natural selection, but if you look around, it's not the fittest. It's that's controlling the world, right? It's not, there's a lot of unfit species that are kind of wandering around. So to say that we're all sort of moving towards low entropy makes no sense. It doesn't, like that species are moving from like chaotic to sort of more and more refined. Naturally, that violates the laws of nature, because the laws of nature, things actually move from order to chaos. But the laws of evolution say that, or the theory, it's not a law, the theory of evolution and natural selection says that naturally, things are moving from essentially high entropy or chaos to low entropy, which makes no sense, because if I take a handful of coins and throw it up in the air, it's not going to land in a perfectly ordered state. But you're expecting me to think, to believe that this is happening randomly, that we are sort of being refined, right, over time, randomly through natural selection. It makes no sense. I'm not saying it's not happening, right? I'm saying that the theory is inaccurate. You have to then pull in intelligence. You have to then pull in intelligent design, because even Brian Greene states it in his book that if you see a system where things move from a state of high entropy to low entropy, right, from chaos to order, then there's an intelligence there. There's life there. So if you're looking around and you're saying that this is all happening, quote, naturally, which naturally basically means randomly, that's a flawed theory. I'm gonna fucking say it. I'll be the first to say it. Like, challenge these people who come up with these theories. Like, they just say shit like it's law, but they're theory, and you have the right to challenge it. So I'm going to challenge it. It's not happening naturally. We're in a simulation. It is happening intentionally. There is a design there. Things are being selected intentionally. Okay? There is an intelligence to nature. I've argued that if this is a simulation, then there's clearly an intelligence that, you can use the word AI. I don't like AI because, as I've said, the word artificial doesn't mean anything. If we are part of nature, then it is intelligence. It's naturally produced intelligence. When a beaver produces a dam, it is not an artificial dam. A beaver is part of nature, and so is humanity. So anything that exists, whether or not it's hazardous, like plastics, right, it's still a function of nature. So if you're seeing a movement, not from, order to chaos, but from chaos to order, then that should tell you that there's an intelligence that's structuring it in a way that things are being more refined over time, right? So the example that Brian Greene uses, so if you walk into a situation where you see a bunch of pennies and all of the heads are facing up in a particular way, that should tell you that that did not happen, quote, naturally or, quote, randomly. That was an intelligence that set those keys there. So that's how you start to pay attention and listen to the intelligence that is trying to communicate with you when you start seeing order. So if you look around, everything is fucking ordered. We're not moving from a state from order to chaos. Natural selection says we're moving from a state from chaos to more finely tuned order. So that should tell you that there's a greater intelligence at the core of this reality. We are in a simulation, and the intelligence or the AI that's controlling the construct. I will use the term AI because when I say AI, you automatically know what I mean. Okay. There is an intelligence that's refining everything. But it's not necessarily in a state of like the fittest, because like I said, there are some unfit. It depends on how do you define what is fit, right? If you say that it's nature that defines what is fit, then human beings should be the biggest, toughest, strongest. Like, we should have all the claws. We should have fur. We should have fucking armadillo skin. You get what I mean? Like, we should be, for us to be at the pinnacle of nature, right? Dominating nature the way we appear to be, appear being the operative word. We should be the strongest, the fittest, but it seems like intelligence or applied intelligence seems to be favored, which tells me then that there's an intelligence that is sort of directing everything, and it favors intelligence, and it's refining and fine-tuning it and moving us to a phase where, once again, here comes the singularity, where there is an intelligence, there will be an intelligence explosion. So that means that this whole survival of the fittest, you pay attention, you look around, it's not something that's happening, quote, naturally, it's happening intentionally, and it's being driven by an intelligence. So I'm going to take a step, that's a whole sidebar, we're going to tie it back in together. I just wanted you guys to have that information. I wanted to record the information and have it and put it out there. Feed your mind. Feed my mind too, because as you all know, I listen to my own podcast as well. So back to my point. If we are in a simulation, I think we are, then people in the future are also in a simulation. That's fine. And so if they can travel back in time, as I've said in the past, I think 2 episodes ago, they wouldn't be able to travel in physical form. They wouldn't be able to travel in physical form because even the very act of observation using a vehicle, which is the body, using a human avatar or a corporeal avatar, their act of observing using an avatar, a physical avatar, could collapse a wave function and change their present, which is our future. And so you can't, one of the laws is, if you're going to travel back in time, you have to go back purely to observe. So whoever it is that closed my door yesterday was probably modifying. It wasn't enough to change anything, or maybe it was, because now I'm talking about it. Ooh, they messed up. Or maybe it was always going to be, like, maybe that had to happen in order to cause something that happens in the future, and it's all a chain of events. So maybe that was what was supposed to happen. They were supposed to shut the door, and by them shutting the door, I'm talking about this in this podcast, and then whatever chain of events that occurs from this moment on, it was caused by them closing the door, or using the mod to affect enough change for me to pay attention, to notice, but it was always going to happen. Obviously, it was always going to happen because it happened. So I digress. So normally, let's go back to Don't Starve. Normally, if you're playing a PS4 or whatever, or the Switch, I cannot affect the character in the game without a controller. But if I mod the game, right, that's on general. But if I mod the game, I should be able to affect little changes, right? If I jailbreak my Switch or my PS4 or whatever. So that's what I think when you have like ghosts that they're able to change something. People, I would say time travelers, hey, look, let's talk about this shit casually. Let's talk about it like it is. Like I said, the confidence in which scientists talk about string theory when they have no fucking evidence of it. They're just extrapolating from, whatever assumptions that they have and thought experiments. It's the same thing that Einstein did, right? They performed thought experiments. And in order for you to have an applicable thought experiment, you do have to sort of talk about these things in a matter-of-fact way. It makes your mind, it opens your mind to it as a probability so that you can easily digest it. So we're going to talk about it in a matter-of-fact way, okay? So time travelers from the future can retroactively travel back. It doesn't violate the laws of physics. Once again, check out the book, Until the End of Time by Brian Greene. I'm only like halfway through. But so far that's what I'm getting, is that just as you can see things moving and forward, but you don't see like a cake unbaking itself, right? We only experience time going forward. He's saying, though, it doesn't violate the laws of physics for the cake to unbake itself. All right. So time travel from future to past does not violate the laws of physics, but there are still laws, right? There are still laws. And I think one of the laws is that everything that I've stated, that you can't do it in physical form, and that you have to be mindful that if you do something, even if it's something small, whatever you do can affect the future in a particular way. And so you have to be mindful that you don't mod your time travel device so that a person that you're interacting with in the past observes your actions and then does something that completely changes the entire timeline. But all of that is still pre-programmed in. And so it was always going to happen in that way, right? So there you go. I'm thinking it's giving, what is it? Travelers on Netflix. You guys go check it out. So in the show Travelers, there's an AI in the future that's trying to affect change by going to the past. And they do it in non-corporeal form. What they do is hijack the bodies of people who are about to die and then use their bodies to interact in that space. So what they're saying indirectly in that show is that you cannot send your body back through time, but you can send your consciousness. And I'm just taking that shit, I'm running with it. I came to that conclusion before watching that show. And it's just because it's what makes the most sense, right? Like if your consciousness in your body, it has to be in the body, in your body, it has to be in the body, can collapse away function, right? Then you have to be mindful not to go back in your actual like present body. You would have to essentially go back and only observe. So that show, Travelers, they are intentionally trying to change the future. And so that's why they're going in and they're doing things. But they're using a super intelligent AI who can plot out what the effects of their causes will be. And then it can say, okay, if you do this, this will happen. If you do that, this will happen. And it can calculate it all out. It's all probability. And so because their mission is being driven by an AI, they have a little bit more freedom of movement, so to speak. And the AI can predict it. So let's just say that there is a super intelligence, that the singularity has already occurred right now. Right? Because if it was going to happen, then it has already happened, which means that a super intelligence, the singularity has occurred and an AI exists right now, which then means that literally anything is possible, if not probable. And that our entire world could constantly be shifting and that these changes could be occurring, which once again would explain a Mandela effect because slight changes are being made. But if the world can be changed in that way, then it's a program. It's a software program that's operating that is being modified, hacked, whatever it is word you want to use. Because once again, you can't say, okay, we're in a simulation without having a philosophical debate or even a thought experiment as to what exactly that fucking means, right? And that's what this podcast is. We're talking about this stuff. We're having future conversations now. We're exploring the future right now. And we're expanding our minds. So tying it all back to my recurring dream with my tall blonde, he hasn't really said anything that I remember. I mean, obviously we're interacting, but the moment I open my eyes, that shit fades away. So I know he's saying something to me. And I remember the emotions, the energy, emotions that I feel. And it's positive and it's joyful. But then I come back here. And then I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I'm going to miss him. But it's happening so, like, I think once a month now. That obviously now I'm going to start talking about it, which is what I'm doing now. Now, to tie it back to food of the gods and to psychedelics, I want to repeat. It is not impossible for your consciousness to travel to another dimension in the same way that it is not impossible for me to go from my consciousness to go from controlling an avatar in the game Don't Starve to controlling an avatar in the game World of Warcraft. I'm going to say that again. Each game, you have to look at each game as a dimension. And each avatar in each game, so the avatar that I control in Don't Starve, hold on, I need to take a drink. Sorry, guys. Live gulping. The avatar that you control in a game Don't Starve isn't the same avatar that you would use in World of Warcraft, unless like you mod it somehow. I don't know. I'm not saying that's improbable, but I'm just saying it's these are two different dimensions. So the world of Azeroth is vastly different from the world of whatever the fuck Don't Starve takes place in. I'm clearly not as well versed in Don't Starve mythos as I am in World of Warcraft. And I'm saying right now because I'm trying to look up what the world is. Fuck it. I'll look it up later. But think about each world, Azeroth, and then the Don't Starve world as like alternate dimensions, right? I'm able to jump from one dimension to another by simply just changing games. So your consciousness is only bound to this form, the face that you see when you look in a mirror, while you are playing this game. But when you sleep, I would bet that when you sleep, your consciousness shifts to another game, to another dimension, where now you are interacting in that world. Excuse me, just burped. You're interacting in that world with a different avatar. Or maybe not even interacting in that world with an avatar at all. And it's simply your consciousness leaves this body, goes to another one. But what DMT allows you to do, what psychedelics allows you to do, is retain the information during your experience and then bring it back to this world. I think that's what's going on. So like, imagine I am a character in Don't Starve, okay? And I think that I'm looking it up right now. Okay, so the character that I presently play as is, what is his name? God dang it. Wes? No, I don't play it Wes. Wes is the, they all have W names. You it's Wilbur. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's Wilson. Is it Wilson? I think I play as Wilson. Yes. Okay. Sorry, guys. So the character right now I play as is a scientist, and his name is Wilson, and he grows a fine beard. Okay, but to Wilson, if I could upload my consciousness into the form of Wilson, I would be like, I am a scientist, and this is the only world that exists, right? And so every time my character Wilson goes to sleep, the consciousness Joe logs off. And then I go, oh, I realize I'm not Wilson. And then I go about my day-to-day existence. Okay, talk about everything happening as it should. So as you can tell, within the last 30 seconds, the audio cut out. I don't know what I was doing, but I clicked something and it stopped recording. So I was like, okay, great. Well, I'm just gonna take a break, upload the first half of this episode, and while I'm doing that, I'm waiting for it to upload, I'm going to look up the world that Wilson lives in, the world of Don't Starve, so that the main setting of Don't Starve, so that I can speak about it, and you know what I mean. So I'm not just saying, whatever the world is called, because I know Azeroth, so I gotta know this world. So I looked it up. I guess, first of all, let me finish the thought that I was making, which was, imagine that in the future, so regroup, imagine in the future, there is a hyper immersive VR game. So you get up, you don't have to work anymore. You just get so absorbed. Like, that's just a thing now. Like, you just exist in worlds, right? So we've moved past hunger, we've moved past famine, everybody's got housing, and that's just the world that we live in the future. It's there's no more suffering. So then, and people are now immortal, right? We've cured aging, all of that. I talk about this on the other podcast, the Dark Oracle's Guides in the Multiverse. It's a short form podcast, just 15 episodes, but it's I talk about that. So in the future, we've achieved all of the things that humanity aspires for, but what's left? Well, boredom, right? So it becomes a culture to experience different, lives. Like, play becomes a culture. Leela becomes a culture. To use Sanskrit word. So you go in, you put on a helmet, and it's, high technology. So it's a highly immersive game, right? And I put on the helmet and I log in, and now I become Wilson. Okay, so what DMT does is when Wilson takes DMT, what for a second what it does is it sort of hacks. It's a hack. It's a jailbreak. It jailbreaks the character's programmed mind so that who I am seeps through. So my consciousness, who I really am, seeps through, and that suspension of disbelief that this technology that allows for the VR gameplay in the future, right? So part of how this technology works, this future technology that I'm describing to you guys, part of how it works is, one, it's highly immersive. Two, it does something to your brain or your mind to make it so that there's a suspension of disbelief, so that whatever reality that your consciousness experiences as that avatar in the game, you just accept. Okay? So that's part of the function. And you know that's part of the function because if you reverse engineer it, that's exactly what's happening in our world right now. We just accept whatever reality that we are presented with. Okay? And then you also accept that you are the avatar. So you look in the mirror, you hold your hand up, and you go, okay, I guess that's me. And then you attach to that avatar. That's all programmed in. And I've mentioned experiments where they've done where they trick people and they replace their hand with a false hand, and then they smash the hand, and you see the person flinch, even though they know that's not their hand, right? It's a false hand. It's a slow introduction that a experimenter does, a scientist does, where they replace their real hand with a fake hand or whatever, and then eventually, boom, they smash with a hammer, and you could see the person like flinch, and that's because your mind is programmed to accept that anything that you have been told is yours, you accept as yours. So reverse engineer what happens in our world and project it into the future. That is what VR gameplay. They're just going to copy what's going on now. They're just going to, by they I mean game programmers, computer programmers who will be working on highly immersive games are going to just reverse engineer from what is going on right now, as above, so below. But it's games all the way down. I think it's games all the way down. Okay, so you put on the VR helmet and you play or I put on the VR helmet and I am Wilson, and I get up and I go and I have to find food and I have to keep my sanity up and things of that nature, and I'm building. But then I come across a plant in the game and it's called DMT. And now the programmers who programmed the game put that plant in there because they know that the effect that it's done intentionally, right? Because they know it's like a Easter egg in a way. And it's a way of allowing me to break from my connection with the avatar Wilson, so that for however long, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, I become aware. It's just, I remind myself that I'm just in a game. And that's intentionally placed there by the programmers. And it takes on different forms, different sort of psychedelics or whatever, but it's intentionally placed there by the programmers just to wake you up for a little bit, just so you go, oh, okay, this is just a game. It also allows, why would the programmers do that? Well, because everything needs, the analogy I used last episode was like on TikTok. If you're on TikTok for too long, you get a thing that says, hey, you've been scrolling for too long, take a break, right? So it's the same thing with the game. If it becomes too immersive, there is something that's in there that allows you to take it, so you remind yourself, okay, hey, it's just a game. Now, imagine if when I take it in the game and then myself kind of pulls forward, all of my experiences that I've had, not as Wilson, but as Joe, and perhaps as even any other character that I played in other realities, can also pull through into the character Wilson that I'm playing, because what's consistent? My consciousness. It's the same consciousness as playing as Wilson in the Don't Starve world. That's the same consciousness as playing in Azeroth as an orc. It's the same character that's playing as Princess Peach in a Mario world. And the same character, it's the same consciousness, and that same consciousness is me. So I obviously have that memory, but while I'm playing as Wilson, I have this technology that is holding all of those things back. right? So what the DMT does is unlocks just a little key for a little bit of that to trickle in. And I think that the same thing happens when you dream, because they say DMT is in every body, right? So you don't have to just take it in order to get it. Your body produces DMT as well. So I think that also occurs when you dream. And when you dream, there's just a little, in case you can't access it, like by taking something like a drug or whatever, it's also in your brain. So your brain releases it, and that a little bit of it peeks in, and then you can see all of the characters that your consciousness is also existing as and playing as in all their worlds, as well as all of the other avatars that you have or are interacting with, which means then that perhaps in another world, in another Earth, in another game, in another reality, in another simulated reality, that tall blonde. So it's not an individual that I would exist with or interact with in this world. It's obvious, it has to be, at least this is my theory, that it has to be someone that my consciousness, another avatar that my consciousness is playing as, and it's like their partner in that world, in that reality. And then that would also mean then that when I play as that avatar in that world, in that dimension, I have dreams of myself. So I'll say that again. So then what that means is that when I play as that avatar in that world, right, and I dream, I'm dreaming of Joe. I dream of Joe. That's a good title for this segment. I dream of Joe. And then that means then that what I'm dreaming about are all these different sort of what we would call dimensions, in the way that the Don't Starve world is a dimension, and then Super Mario Brothers world is a dimension, and then Azeroth in World of Warcraft. These are all different dimensions, and I think that that's what we're also pulling from. So when artists create, you can't create from nothing. Say that again. You can't create from nothing. So a lot of the things that we think we're imagining, all imagination is a pulling forth of constructs from other dimensions into this one, in the form of illustrations and in dreams, right? Which is what a movie is a type of dream. You can't necessarily interact with it, not yet, but eventually there will come a time when we will be able to interact with these dreams in a way that is unique only to our reality, by copying them, by cloning them. So you have Game of Thrones where you have dragons and things like that. Well, you can't create a dragon because the physics of this reality, or the programming of this, I can't put a dragon in, let's say, in the Don't Starve world if it's not already sort of coded that way. But I can modify like a clone of it if I knew how to program it. And that's what creators do. That's what artists are, right? And artists, not just painters, but like people who are working in film, who will eventually create like VR games where you will be able to, on some level, like control a virtual dragon. What I'm saying is that dragons exist and are just as real as a dog or a lizard in this reality. But they're only real in that reality where they exist as real, like in that dimension. Just like orcs are only real in the world of Warcraft, or in, there are different types of orcs, right? So you have orcs also in like the Lord of the Rings world or whatever. Middle Earth or whatever. But I'm saying that all of these things that we imagine exist in some dimension and are just as tangible as you and I are in this dimension. Which once again, that means then that there's a world that doesn't have cars, right? And the way people travel are like with unicorns or flying horses, like a Pegasus or something like that. And that means then that there's people in that world that are dreaming of airplanes or metal birds, kind of like Da Vinci did. You get it? So you can't like imagine something that doesn't already exist. You can't create, so like you're pulling from something that already exists, because not only is all of time happening right now, but all of these dimensions also exist right now. You're gonna have to listen to this a few times, and I'm gonna have to listen to this a few times too, because these images are just coming for me, and I'm just speaking in real time. So that's what's going on. So when you take a drug, like a DMT or whatever, and then you're going to the same place where there are elves, like those DMT elves, what I'm saying is that those entities that we're interacting with are real entities in a real dimension that your consciousness has just sort of pulled from this avatar and then entered into that avatar and is interacting in that world. And you're interacting with, quote, real beings, right? But you appear to them, I would say, as a non-corporeal entity or as a person who has essentially possessed a form. I've never done DMT, so I don't know. I'm going to have to really delve in. And if you have had DMT and you want to share your experience, please either comment in YouTube or message me, email me, depending on where you're listening, at1bfpodcast@gmail.com. If you go to solo.to/JolieArtist, which I put in every description on the YouTube, you should be able to see a contact form as well. If you're listening and you are on Spotify, but you found me through TikTok, go to my TikTok page and click on the hyperlink. You'll see it, solo.to/JolieArtist. I want to hear your experiences, but I do think that these dimensions are real dimensions that are just as real as this one. And it's just your consciousness that's traveling from dimension to dimension, and you're interacting with these entities, which, going back, if I think back then of the door, then, or even of UFOs, right, which they move, like they appear to violate the laws of physics because of the way they move, but they could be non-corporeal observers. And okay, this is when it starts to get even wilder. They could have taken either they're from the past, or they're from the future, or they're from another dimension. Okay, if they're from the past, then the analogy or the example that I used to explain how they would come from the past is that in the 4.5 billion years of Earth history, in the 200,000 to 300,000 years that human beings have only existed, that's like 0.01% that we've existed out of Earth's total runtime or history. We can't be the most advanced civilization to ever walk the face of this planet. We just can't. And if you look up the cerulean hypothesis, a couple of scientists have said that, and somebody actually posted this. So I had that idea, and then somebody posted this hypothesis. I can't remember her name right now, but she's got Princess Jasmine icon. And shout out to you. I pinned it in the comments of the video where I'm talking about that. But it's called the cerulean hypothesis. And they say that we don't have much evidence of what has happened on Earth beyond 2.5 million years. That's nothing compared to the 4.5 billion years of Earth's existence. So if they are time travelers from the past, the way they would be time travelers from the past is if a civilization in our past reached singularity, developed time travel, or faster than light speed travel, and now they're coming forward, and that's what we're seeing. They could also be from the future, but traveling back in non-corporeal form so that they can observe, right? But in non-corporeal form, so they can observe, but without altering, observe without form, so that they don't collapse wave function, so that their future, I should say our future, their present, doesn't get affected by their observation. So that might be what's going on. The third option could be that they are taking what is their equivalent of DMT. And so what you interact with, what we see as ghosts or whatever, demons, whatever it is, they could be entities from a different game. So let's say Earth is a simulation. It's a game, right? It's a hologram. But there are other planets or other games, other dimensions. So Earth is a dimension, but then there are other dimensions or games. And so avatars people, consciousness that exists as avatars in other dimensions, take DMT and then they show up in our reality. They transfer, however briefly, they utilize DMT to disconnect and then transfer their consciousness to observe this world and interact with us. And that's what we are seeing as either ghosts or angels or elves even. There's a reality of elves in another dimension. And that I would say that there's an interaction sort of all the time. And I would also say that you probably can play as an elf, just as you're playing as a human. And I would also go even as far as to say that humans are myths to them, the way elves are myths to us. This is a fun episode, guys. You can tell I'm getting tired because my brain's going. But it is a fun episode. So to tie it all the way back, I want you guys to really sit with what that means. Because the more you start to think about these sort of ideas, the larger our reality seems. And that's not just us, right? And so the more practical these things seem, if you start weaving in simulation hypothesis, you start weaving in a hologramic, universal theory, and things like that, it's very dense. It's very dense. So, I had a video that I posted where I asked, if I am a creator of a sub-reality, right? My mind creates a sub-reality when I dream. All right? And that means that I am then a god of my dream. But while I'm dreaming, I don't realize that I'm the one, this is my dream that's being constructed by my mind until I wake up. So then that means that while I'm in the dream, I am a god awake in a dream, or I should say interacting in a dream, in a world, in a dimension, a mini dimension of my creation. And so then the people who I interact with are also creations of my mind. That is if you believe that dreams are only a construct of your mind. But if you do, then that means that the entities that you interact with, even the ones that are chasing you, and I had people say, I wouldn't create a demon. Well, your mind is being influenced by the mythos that exists in this reality. So you didn't in a way create a demon. The demon was a co-created sort of entity, right? That you're pulling into that world that you're creating, but it's based on something that is truly believed in the world, in your waking world, that you're somehow making real in that dimension. So you did create it. You weren't inspired, or you were inspired by it, and you're not in control of what you're creating, but it's like a thought form. These are real. There are things called thought forms. Google tulpas, Tulpas. I forget the other word for them, but they're essentially psychic. They're entities that are created by psychic energies. So if you are a creation of a god, or as people like to say, we are God experiencing itself in fractals, then if you are a piece of the hologram, you collected within you is everything that a hologram has on a larger scale. That's how holograms work. So if you are a piece of a god, if you're a fragment of a god, and a god creates worlds, then you can create a world, and you are creating little worlds when you dream. But you could also, so that's one, and maybe there's different types of dreams. So that's maybe one type of dream where you're just creating, your mind, your consciousness creates worlds. And it's your little God creating little worlds, little realities. Because that's just what you do. But then on the opposite end, there could be other types of dreams where you're full on interacting with or in another dimension. And it could be based on what, maybe you've taken something that triggered DMT, and thus you're now being projected into a dimension where you are seeing demons and things like that. But that's like a demon dimension or whatever. And then it could be that, you're pulling residuals from an alternate, reality that you're existing on. Because remember what I said at the beginning, or somewhat of the beginning, that time flows different in each dimension. So if I put The Sims and I put that next to World of Warcraft, then I put that next to Don't Starve, and you match the time's going to be different. But ultimately, my time in this world is going to flow much slower than all of those 3 games. But then that just means then that whatever it is that is outside of this world, before we come into this world, time moves at a much different pace in that world. So, which then could say 4.6 billion years for us could be like the equivalent of 4.6 billion years for Earth, I should say, would be or could be the equivalent of like 5 years in the outside world. And so let's say like in the game, like of World of Warcraft, things that the lore says it took thousands of years. But to us in our world, observing the game, it's not thousands of years. It's just been a couple of years. You really have to start thinking of time like that. Like it's a scale thing, but if you pull back, it like expands your mind even more. Now, this is what when the recording cut out, and I was going to look up the world in which Don't Starve takes place. Hand to God, I did not know. Okay, so I am swearing I did not know. I have no reason to lie to you. This actually happened. So I looked it up, and the world in which Don't Starve takes place in is it's called The Constant. The Constant is the main setting of Don't Starve. It is a multiverse containing many worlds, aka dimensions, realm, or planar, in which the main characters are trapped through various means and are forced to survive its many perils. Yeah. Says the Constant consists of all playable areas of Don't Starve, including the surface world, caves, ruins, and possibly the worlds of Shipwrecked and Hamlet. These areas are contained in separate dimensions within the Constant itself. In Don't Starve Together, the florid postern connects these dimensions, allowing survivors to travel between them. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, I'm kind of low-key, like, trying to read. Oh, I'm reading. Okay, so this is weird. So, time doesn't flow normally in the Constant. This is expressed through Maxwell and Charlie, who both wonder how much time has passed. And this is trippy, guys. I'm reading this in real time. So this is weird. Okay. How much time has passed in the real world in certain quotes or through observation by Wagstaff. Wagstaff, another character in the game, also notes that the rates of plant growths, meat drying, and beefalo hair regrowth are unnaturally fast. Guys, you can't make this up. Characters from I swear to God on my life, I swear to the gods, I swear to fate, I swear to the super intelligence. I did not read this before I recorded this episode. I couldn't even think of the name. And now, okay, so here we go. Evidence of retrocausality. Characters from the real world have entered the Constant through different methods. Maxwell and Charlie were taken in the Constant through Codex Umbra, which is technology, right? In Forbidden Knowledge, Maxwell, through a Voxela radio, offered Wilson secret knowledge to build a portal. So now that's magic. So yeah, all these different ways to enter into these dimensions. Interesting. Yeah, if you want to read more, I think if you go to don'tstarve.fandom.com, you should see it all there. It's crazy. Every time a survivor is killed, they're revived in a different dimension. Interesting. Also, rifts may exist between the Constant and the real world, allowing items to move between the two realities, as stated by one of Wagstaff's quotes. Very interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's wild. Okay, well, there you go. Can't make this up. For me, it's confirmation. I am choosing to take this as confirmation. Chain of events. if it hadn't had cut out when it cut out, and I don't know why it cut out, I just would have been referring to it. I wouldn't be saying exactly what I'm saying right now. It cut out randomly, quote, randomly. But then I said almost like, close to verbatim, like all of the things. I don't even remember what I was saying, but being able to like shift and different things that allow you to get to these different dimensions. And then because it cut out and just the way my brain works, I didn't just start recording. I was like, okay, I'll let that finish uploading and then I'll just look up what the world is. And I went into Google and I typed in, so you can, don't starve world. And the first thing that came up was the constant. And I clicked on it because I saw where it says it's a multiverse. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then boom, the rest of it played out. I keep likening everything to dominoes, right? I don't know if you ever watch those videos where there's like just elaborate domino pieces are laid out, and then they hit the one piece, that's the first cause event, and then everything else just sort of strapples. And then each line is like its own thing, converging or whatever, but each line to me is like a different timeline and now a different dimension. It's beyond the simulation. I think when we say things like simulation, we whittle things down to, something small, right? Like that we can control in our computer. But if you think about like all of the games that exist and all of the worlds that have been created in this world, and then you repeat the mantra, as above, so below, as within, so without, what that tells me, you don't have to take the information. I'm going to take that shit and run with it. What that tells me is that everything, basically what I said, makes sense on some level. Like everybody that I paint is a real person somewhere. It might be an avatar that I've played as in a different world. Why am I playing these specific, why am I painting these specific faces? I'm, quote, making them up. And I'm pulling from references, but why am I choosing these references in this way? Like even like just now, I said like a string of sentences based on I said like I'm recording and then it's just coming and I'm seeing the visuals and so it's a stream of consciousness. But then what's next? Then I go into my phone because the thing stopped recording and then I find something verbatim. But what led up to that, I just randomly started playing Don't Starve again with my daughter. And here we go. Like chain of events. You just not in control. I couldn't control this. I couldn't have written this. I couldn't have made this happen. Which ties itself all the way back to like just being a conscious observer and understanding that it's all laid out. It's all laid out. So I don't know who the gentleman that I keep dreaming about is. And I imagine if it's a bestie or a partner or a husband, then whatever avatar that I am in that world where he exists is probably dreaming of myself and my husband. So that's interesting. It's all very interesting. It's the world that they want us to believe this world is such a paltry representation of what this dimension actually is. Yeah, I'm going to say that again. The world that we've been told this place is, this dimension is such a paltry, it's like black and white compared to what this dimension actually is. Yeah. I choose to believe that whatever this is, because everywhere you look, it's ordered, and intentional and intelligent. So I choose to believe. It's a choice. You could believe that this is like, we're just insignificant pond scum, but that it doesn't explain all the other shit. It doesn't. Or you can choose to believe otherwise and construct your own narrative and your own explanations as to what is really going on. But in order for you to do that, and to do so intelligently, and to form a very solid foundation on your observations, you have to pull from everything. You have to pull from people's experiences when they hallucinate. What does that mean? You have to pull from people's experiences when they detach from self, using even meditation or hallucinogens. You have to really take all of those things into consideration. And as it stands right now, our so-called scientists dismiss those things. How can you form a cohesive theory of everything if you dismiss evidence that doesn't fit into whatever narrative that you want it to fit? That's not science. You can't pick and choose and say, well, I don't want to believe that, so that's not real. I don't want to believe that. I don't want to accept the experiences of people have when they take DMT. I don't want to accept the experiences of what people see who are schizophrenic. I don't want to accept the experiences that people who are perfectly sane and normal report seeing, quote, normal, report seeing. I'd rather dismiss them as crazy. And then with that, ignoring all of these other things, but then you want to talk about string theory that you really have no evidence for as it stands. Right? They're just thought experiments. So you want, sorry, I was pulling a chair open, I didn't fart. I was pulling a chair. But you call yourself a scientist? That's not science. That's bias. Like a true scientist would take all of these things into consideration. If you are unbiased by scientific dogma, you would take all of these things into consideration. So to me, I'm not willing. I'll pull information from wherever I can get information from. I'll listen to a Brian Greene, but I'll also listen to an Anthony Peake, and I'll also listen to a Bernardo Castro, and I'll also listen to the Three Initiates. I'm going to take in and I'm going to listen to people who say, I've had this experience. And I'm going to listen to, what is his name? Ram Dass, and then the other guy, his partner, Timothy, Leary. I'm going to listen to Alan Watts, right? Because in order for us to understand the nature of our reality, if we are fractals, then each piece that you pull together, each experience of each fractal can help form a whole, and thus a thorough and more clear and concise explanation, definition, view of what this world truly is. You would have to come together in order for you to get the pieces. If you are, it's like a puzzle, and each individual's experience is a piece of the puzzle. Now, what our scientists are doing, not all, there are some that have very open minds, right? You have a Sam Harris, you have a, like Timothy Leary, like I said, there's others. I'm having like a brain fart right now. I think my brain's tired. As hard as this stuff is to take in, it's also as hard for me to get out. You have Lex Fridman. You have all of these people that are coming out. I can't think of their names right now. The guy who wrote Food of the God, Terence McKenna. These are all scientists, but they're all little pieces. So I'm not going to take in the information that are closed-minded scientists. I'm not going to take in their information because by their definition and by their own admission, they're not taking in all of the data. They're picking and choosing what data works for them. If you pick and choose what data works for you, then it's going to support whatever argument that you want to support. But then you're skewing the information to something that supports your worldview. And you're building a different piece of the puzzle. You're building a different type of puzzle because it's not a clear puzzle if you're not taking in all the pieces. Hello? So I'm gonna encourage you. There's some things that you can listen, and then you go, that doesn't click with me. I don't I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. I don't like how that makes me feel. Right? But use your intuition as your guide. But I keep going back to the puzzle analogy. If we are truly going to understand the nature of our reality, you can't throw out the writings of like a Dean Radin. You can't ignore the findings of the CIA with their astral projection experiments. You can't do that and just say, well, this is just all this world is. We're on a, spiraling through space or whatever. Okay, well, what about this? What about ghosts? What about aliens? What about, UFOs? What about elves, like DMT elves? What about all these shit? What about dreams? What is really going on here? And then that's what I aspire to do with this podcast. Help me, guys. If you enjoy the concepts that are discussed, right? We have Joe Rogan. That's just one person. We have Alex Fridman. That's just one person, right? If you enjoy there's not a lot of people that are talking about this. Help. We need more minds on this, because imagine the world that we grew up in, the perception of the reality that we were taught to believe, and what we have been taught even about death, and how much mental anguish and suffering that human beings, you and I, go through because based on incomplete pieces of the puzzle, we've been told that when a person dies, that's it. Based on what? That's not true. It's bullshit. Everything in this world is cyclical. Things are constantly shifting. What about the experiences of people who have had near-death experiences? Oh, that doesn't fit into our worldview. Let's throw that shit out. Stupid. Think about the people who are suffering, people who are afraid of death, people who are mourning their loved ones because they feel like they will never see them again, because we have been programmed to believe in an incomplete view of what this dimension is. Help me with this, because the more people that listen to this podcast, the more these sort of discussions can be had seriously and on a greater scale. Share the podcast. I've noticed that you guys have been reviewing and leaving like 5-star reviews on I just noticed. I looked and I was like, oh shit, I've got like 25 stars. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Let's do more of that. It's not necessarily about me. I'm just a vessel in which these sort of information can come out. And I've been put in this avatar and have been, if you look at my natal chart, even the way I speak, it's meant to be listened to. Because our society needs to change. And we're there. We're getting there. But it does need to change, right? And the things that we value need to change. And it shouldn't be about dumb shit, And so the more like these sort of podcasts do well, the more other people who have things to say, who have these ideas to talk about, will be encouraged to also come forth and share their experiences and share their theories, right? Because my experiences I can only speak on what I've read and what I've experienced, and I only have one lifetime in this avatar to do it. But we can go through this and figure this out really quickly, the more minds we get on this. If it becomes popular for more people, more women to talk about these things, more people of color to talk about their experiences. Because natives, indigenous people, their experience of reality is different. It appears that indigenous people of certain, lands who are deeply entrenched in their in their brand or their culture's spiritualism have a different experience with reality. So we need more of those, but it's got to become normative so that then we can accept that. And once that becomes normative, then more and more people will feel comfortable sharing their stories, talking about their experiences, right? Listen to how I started the podcast. Hey guys, so I keep having this dream of like a tall blonde, And I know the connotations that what comes with that, right? People want to like dismiss it. So there was a little bit of like trepidation. But can we live in a world? I'd love to live in a world where you can make a statement like that and people listen like interesting. And then they go, you know what? That happens to me too. Well, what do you think that means? I don't know. Right? The conclusion from Terence McKenna's Food of the God is, can we get to a place where psychedelics become a regular part of our existence? The way fucking coffee is and alcohol is, which are terrible, alcohol specifically, terrible drug, right? I'm like, we're not even open up that can of worms as to what's going on there, you know? And it's become so ingrained. Now imagine we live in a society where responsibly psychedelics are taking in. Our scientists are taking psychedelics because right now they're still illegal for some fucking reason. That has to change, right? Because ultimately, we're all going to have to face our own mortality, and we're going to face the mortality of people we care about. Now, do you want to live in a world where there's fear around that? Because the only reason why there's fear around that is because of what we've been told. It's, if you know what it is. When you're dead, you're dead. You're warm food. That's it. Yeah, your body. But if you want to live in a world where it is taken at face value, that when your avatar dies, you just loop back, right? I lost my little sister when I was 10 years old. I know now. She's out there somewhere. Her consciousness is out there somewhere. Maybe that's who shut the door yesterday. I don't know. I've theorized that she could be my cousin. But either way, either she's my cousin or she's in a parallel universe. As in, what I mean by she's my cousin is like she reincarnated, because he was born a month after she died. And there's a lot of similarities between the two of them. So very well could be her. But I have the freedom, I have the intellectual freedom to accept that, so I don't mourn her loss, because I know energy cannot be created or destroyed, only modified. But there are people who are in so much pain right now because they think that the person that they love is dying. And they're dying because their body is failing them. And because we live in a society that teaches us that when a person's body fails them, that's it, forever, for good. There's a lot of, in my opinion, unnecessary suffering that's going on that doesn't have to. My father's body is failing him right now. He's been on dialysis since I was 17. He's still going. But eventually I know that he will leave his body. I will miss him. But I know that it's better for him to continue to exist and have a different experience in a body that is better. And I'm at peace with that. Like, you cannot convince me at this point, with everything that I've learned and everything that I know, you cannot convince me that when he goes, that's it forever for him. Nope. You literally couldn't pay me money to believe that, because I know that's not true. And so I have peace around that. And I can enjoy him while he's here without the fear and the grieving and the emotional intensity, the negative emotional intensity that comes with loss. And I want that to be normal. And there are cultures where that is normal. Again, I can imagine them. I just can't pull up the name right now. But it's true. And so let's make that normal. Thanks for listening.